Welcome to Quarter Old Money News Channel. Today, we are going back to 1993 to explore a small Canadian coin that may look ordinary at first glance, but carries a fascinating piece of Canadian history. It is the Canadian 1-cent coin featuring the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. For decades, millions of these little pennies passed through Canadian pockets, wallets, cash registers, homes, and family coin jars. Most people never stopped to wonder where they had been or whether they might someday become collectible. But when you place one of these coins under a bright light and examine it carefully, you begin to see something more than just 1 cent. You see a moment in Canada's history. The year 1993 was an interesting period for Canada. The country was changing, technology was moving forward, and everyday life was beginning to look very different from previous generations. Yet Canadians were still using the humble 1-cent coin in ordinary transactions. A penny could be almost invisible in someone's pocket, but it was part of daily life. Perhaps one was used to complete a purchase at a local shop, dropped into a child's savings jar, or placed in an old wallet and forgotten for years. The obverse of the 1993 Canadian 1-cent coin carries the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. Her image appeared on Canadian coins throughout her long reign and became one of the most recognizable features of modern Canadian currency. The inscription around her portrait identifies her as Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada. For collectors, this portrait is more than decoration. It represents an important era in Canadian numismatic history. Now turn the coin over, and you will see one of Canada's most famous national symbols, the maple leaf. The reverse of the penny features 2 maple leaves on a single twig, together with the denomination and the year 1993. The maple leaf has long represented Canada around the world, so even this tiny copper-colored coin carries a strong national identity. But here's where the story becomes especially interesting for collectors. Not every coin from the same year has exactly the same collector value. Condition can make a major difference. Imagine 2 1993 Canadian pennies sitting side by side. One has spent 30 years moving through pockets, machines, drawers, and cash registers. Its surface is scratched, and its details are worn. The other was carefully protected shortly after it was produced. Its original details remain sharp, its surfaces are cleaner, and it has very little wear. Both coins may have the same date, but collectors can value them very differently. This is why grading is so important. Collectors examine a coin's strike, surface condition, luster, marks, and overall preservation. A circulated 1993 penny is normally a modest collectible, while an exceptionally well-preserved example can attract greater interest. Some 1993 Canadian 1-cent pieces were also produced in proof format for collectors, making them different from ordinary circulation strikes. And then there are errors. A genuine mint error can sometimes make a coin much more interesting and valuable, but this is where collectors need to be extremely careful. A scratch, dent, discoloration, or damage caused after the coin left the Royal Canadian Mint is not automatically a valuable mint error. Before believing a dramatic value claim, collectors should compare the coin with reliable references and, when necessary, seek professional authentication. You may have heard sensational claims about a 1993 Canadian penny supposedly being worth enormous amounts, including figures such as $510,000. But we need to be clear, that figure should not be treated as the normal value of a 1993 Canadian 1-cent coin. An ordinary 1993 penny is not automatically worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. If an exceptional price were ever associated with a coin, it would have to relate to a very specific, authenticated specimen, extraordinary condition, or documented rarity, not simply the year 1993. So if you have one of these pennies, what should you do? First, don't clean it. Cleaning can damage the original surface and actually make a potentially collectible coin less desirable. Hold it gently by the edges. Use good lighting. Look carefully at the date, Queen Elizabeth II's portrait, the maple leaves, lettering, rim, and surfaces. Compare what you see with trustworthy Canadian coin references. If the coin appears unusually well preserved or seems to contain a genuine mint-made error, professional evaluation may be worthwhile. There is also something emotional about these small coins that has nothing to do with price. Think about how many hands a 1993 penny may have passed through. Perhaps someone received it as change after buying groceries. Perhaps a child placed it into a piggy bank. Perhaps a parent saved it in a drawer. Years later, that same coin could become part of an inherited collection, connecting one generation with another. That is the magic of coin collecting. A coin does not have to be worth thousands of dollars to be important. Sometimes its greatest value is the story it carries. The portrait of Queen Elizabeth II connects it to a remarkable period of Canadian history. The maple leaves connect it to Canadian identity. The date 1993 freezes one small moment in time. And perhaps that's why you should never dismiss an old coin simply because it looks ordinary. The next time you find a 1993 Canadian 1-cent coin, don't immediately toss it into a pile of loose change. Pick it up, turn it over, look closely, ask questions, learn what makes an ordinary coin different from an exceptional one. Because the real treasure in coin collecting isn't always a huge price tag. Sometimes it's the discovery itself, the moment when an everyday object suddenly becomes a piece of history. So if you enjoyed this journey into the story of the 1993 Canadian 1-cent coin, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Quarter Old Money News channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next coin history story. And share this video with another coin collector. They may have an old Canadian penny sitting in a drawer right now, waiting to be discovered. Remember, every coin has a story, and sometimes history is hiding in something as small as 1 cent. We are taking a close look at one of the most interesting modern American quarters, the 2005 Minnesota State Quarter, featuring the words, Minnesota 1858, Land of 10,000 Lakes, 2005. This ordinary-looking 25-cent coin became famous among collectors because some examples show a fascinating double-die variety, often called the extra tree Minnesota quarter. And you may have heard enormous claims online, including figures such as $730,000 or more. But before you believe a headline like that, let's uncover what is actually special about this coin and what collectors really look for. The Minnesota Quarter was the 32nd release in the United States 50-state quarters program, celebrating Minnesota and its admission to the Union in 1858. The reverse design captures the character of the state with its lakes, trees, a loon, and 2 people fishing. The phrase, Land of 10,000 Lakes, immediately connects the coin with one of Minnesota's most famous identities. The coin entered circulation in 2005, when millions of Americans were collecting state quarters and checking their pocket change for interesting varieties. On the obverse is the familiar portrait of George Washington, while the reverse tells Minnesota's story. The date 1858 represents Minnesota's statehood, while 2005 identifies the year the state quarter was issued. The combination of these dates makes the coin a tiny history lesson every time you hold it. But there is something most people never notice. Look carefully at the trees on the reverse. Some 2005 Minnesota quarters, particularly the famous Philadelphia minted variety, show doubling in the tree design. Collectors often call these the extra tree quarters. PCGS has documented more than 50 different Minnesota double-die varieties, and the major variety is widely known among collectors as the FS801 double-die reverse. PCGS notes that the 2005 P Minnesota quarter had a mintage of about 239.6 million pieces, while only a much smaller number are known with the major double-die variety. This is where the story becomes fascinating. The extra tree is not simply a scratch on the coin. A genuine double die is created during the die-making process, meaning the unusual design is part of the die itself. On the strongest examples, you can see an additional tree-like image beside the normal trees on the Minnesota reverse. But be careful. Not every coin that appears to have an extra line or mark is a valuable double die. Damage, scratches, die chips, and other forms of post-mint damage can easily fool inexperienced collectors. That is why serious collectors compare their coin with confirmed reference photographs, and for valuable examples, consider professional attribution and grading. Now let's talk about the number that gets attention online: $730,000 plus. A claim of $730,000 should not be presented as the normal value of a 2005 Minnesota quarter. There is no reliable evidence in the sources reviewed here showing an ordinary 2005 Minnesota quarter selling for $730,000. In fact, documented collector market information is dramatically lower. PCGS reports that examples of the major 2005 P double die variety have traded around $40 in MS65 and around $275 in MS67, depending on the exact coin and market conditions. That doesn't make the coin boring. Quite the opposite. Imagine finding a quarter in your change that looks exactly like every other Minnesota quarter until you turn it over and notice something strange in the trees. You grab a magnifying glass. You compare the design with photographs. Suddenly, that ordinary 25-cent coin becomes a numismatic mystery. And that is the excitement of coin hunting. The standard 2005 Minnesota quarter is common. The Philadelphia Mint produced approximately 239.6 million, while Denver produced approximately 248.4 million circulation pieces. Proof and special collector issues were also produced. So the date alone doesn't make the coin rare. The difference is in the variety, the condition, and the strength of the doubling. A heavily circulated example may show wear that makes the extra tree variety difficult to identify. A sharp, uncirculated example can preserve much more of the original detail. That's why grading becomes important. A professional grading service examines the coin's condition and can authenticate and attribute recognized varieties. Collectors should also understand the mint mark. A P indicates Philadelphia, while a D indicates Denver. The famous FS 801 variety discussed by PCGS is associated with the 2005 P Minnesota quarter. There are also double die varieties associated with other mint issues, so the exact mint mark and variety matter. If you are searching your own collection tonight, start with the reverse. Look at the group of evergreen trees. Compare the spacing and shapes carefully. Don't use a coin cleaning solution, polish, or abrasive material. Cleaning can permanently damage the surface and may reduce the coin's collector appeal. Use a magnifying glass or a good coin microscope instead. And remember one important rule: never assume a dramatic price claim is true just because it appears in a YouTube title, social media post, or online advertisement. The value of a coin depends on what the coin actually is. Its date, its mint mark, its variety, its era, its condition, its authentication, and most importantly, what collectors are actually willing to pay for that specific example. The 2005 Minnesota quarter is a perfect example of how an ordinary American coin can become fascinating through careful observation. Most examples are simply worth their face value, but recognized double die varieties can carry meaningful collector premiums, especially when the doubling is clear and the coin is in excellent condition. Current published market information places strong examples far below sensational claims of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So if you have a Minnesota quarter in your pocket, don't throw it away. Turn it over. Look at the trees. Look for the details. Check the mint mark. And compare what you find with trusted numismatic references. Because the real treasure isn't always a giant price tag. Sometimes the treasure is discovering that you have found a genuine variety that most people would never notice. A quarter can buy only 25 cents worth of goods, but the history inside the quarter can be priceless to a collector. The Minnesota State Quarter represents a state famous for lakes, forests, fishing, and American history. It also represents one of the most interesting modern double-die varieties found in the State Quarters series. So the next time someone hands you a quarter, take a second look. It might be completely ordinary, or it might have a little something extra hiding among the trees. Thank you for watching Quarter Old Money News channel. If you enjoyed this journey into the 2005 Minnesota State Quarter, like this video, subscribe to Quarter Old Money News channel, turn on the notification bell, and share this video with another coin collector. And remember, don't judge a coin by its face value alone. Sometimes, the smallest details are where the real story begins.